So Vaughn, we did have a question also that came in off the survey asking about what to do about breast cancer. And I have friends who've gone through breast cancer. They've had recovery from breast cancer. A lot of different philosophies, a lot of different modalities to deal with particularly the women's issues of cancer. But cancer, of course, affects everybody. And it just seems like there's this absolute epidemic of cancer, and cancer seems to be such a huge scare, and it is an awful disease. The first question I wanted to ask you, is this a historical disease? Has this been with us since the beginning, and we just didn't know what it was, or is it a new phenomenon?
Likely, yes. Cancer has always been a part of human experience. Nowhere near to the degree that it's seen today. So, what cancers are is they're cells that have gone rogue. DNA inside of cells mutates in ways where the reproduction of cells becomes uncontrolled. And cells that should be dying and not reproducing reproduce out of control and take over the body. And your own cells end up killing you. They end up acting like a bacteria or a virus and killing you. And this has been happening all throughout human history. I mean, people have been having DNA mutations where cells went rogue and started to sort of attack and compromise the health of the system. And if you look back, certainly for centuries there's been writing about tumors. You can go back many years, and people have written about tumors for many years. And you can look at animal models and you find some tumors in nature, little bits. And there's historical evidence of tumors as well, but at dramatically lower percentages than we see in America today. And people started really talking about this in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that there were these quote-unquote diseases of civilization that pre-modern peoples didn't seem to get, and that historical peoples didn't seem to get, and that we're getting these cancers left and right, and that this was weird and must be caused by our lifestyle. And the initial reaction of most doctors was, no, it's just because we're living longer. Well, that's not true. Unequivocally not true. I mean, first of all, people are getting cancers at younger and younger ages. And then also, there are many very long-lived, very healthy populations on Earth that get very little cancer. Very little breast cancer, very little colon cancer. Cancer is virtually non-existent. It just isn't a cause of sickness and death in these cultures. And yet they live to a ripe old age. So I think what you're really asking, and what is a really valuable and powerful point, is that most of the cancer people experience really is a consequence of the civilization that we live in. It is a lifestyle-based disease. That doesn't mean there aren't genetic factors. So there are people who are at much higher risks for cancers based on genes. And there are some cancers that are almost entirely genetic. Some people really do have a ticking time bomb. But that's very rare. It's not the majority of cases. Most people have a certain level of genetic cancer risk, and it's only because our lifestyle is so unhealthy and so artificial that they ever actually manifest that risk into getting a form of cancer, whether it be breast cancer or bone cancer or pancreatic cancer. So cancer is a lifestyle disease. It is a disease of civilization. And when we say that, we have to be careful to not do what's called victim blaming. To not look at people and say, like, it's your fault you have cancer and you could have or should have done something differently. I don't think that's the proper perspective at all. It's just we really do need to accept at a very deep level that the total way we live in our culture is creating a much higher level of this disease than we would see otherwise, and that we could do things both as individuals and also at the level of our culture to prevent certainly much of the cancer we see, and then probably also do things with our lifestyle that could help in actual cancer treatment.
Okay, so that's kind of a point of debate. The expression of the genome, right, your genetics, and there's been articles recently about the breakthroughs in epigenetics, where so there's this sort of predetermined, pre-written story of our lives wrapped up in our DNA, but there's also the worst case and the best case within that story.
The way to look at DNA, the DNA you're born with mostly determines a spectrum of potential futures for you.
Right.
And that spectrum is much broader than scientists used to think. And then it's the way you live your life and the choices you make that determine where on that spectrum you fall.
Right.
And there's greater likelihoods of certain events for certain people. So, I may be born with genes that give me a greater probability of heart disease, and someone else may be born with genes that give me a greater probability of colon cancer. Well, what does that mean? It means that I have DNA that's built in a way Where if I live my life wrong, say I eat lots of junky foods and don't exercise, I'm going to accumulate more arterial plaque than you are. Whereas my DNA surveillance machinery that keeps my cells from going cancerous may be a little better than yours. So I can get away with consuming more DNA-altering pesticides than you can. But the critical thing is that if both of us live a really healthy lifestyle, that spectrum of possibility of ending in these adverse disease events, we're not going to explore those possibilities. We're going to keep ourselves over here in kind of the good spectrum that our genes allow. Healthy heart, healthy cells,
So there's a predisposition, but within what is, written, there certainly we can influence the outcomes.
Yeah, and it's even funny, even this language of predisposition makes the picture look more complicated than it actually is. So one way that I would look at it is different people deal with physical wounds in different ways, right?
Sure.
So if you take someone and let's say they're in a car accident and something pierces through their body, some people are actually going to die from that because they can't make clotting factor. These are like hemophiliacs.
Right.
So they genetically can't clot their blood, so a wound that wouldn't ultimately be fatal to me or you could kill them. Other people, their bodies are going to deal with this very resiliently. They're going to heal the wound far more quickly and they're not going to have dysfunction. And then most people are kind of in the middle. The wounding is going to be bad, it's going to take a while to recover, they're going to have a lot of blood loss. Well, would you say that those people have a genetic predisposition to suffering more from being wounded in a car accident? It's a bizarre way to think, right? A car accident is this weird, unnatural event. Right. And when this weird, unnatural event happens, sure, there are underlying genetic factors where some people are going to deal with it better than others. But we would never think about it as like a genetic predisposition to being hurt worse in a car accident.
Right.
Cancer is a weird, unnatural event. And of course there are different underlying predispositions to whether you're going to end up with colon cancer or not, given the circumstances of modern life. But in a very real way, living a modern American lifestyle is like being in a car accident. It's unnatural. It's not something that our biology anticipated. Our biology didn't anticipate consuming preservatives, consuming food dyes, being exposed to toxic pollution, being bombarded with heavy metals, having immense psychological stress from strange office jobs, electromagnetic field radiation. I mean, our bodies didn't anticipate a sedentary lifestyle. Our ancestors were never sedentary, you had to feed yourself. So you have all this weird, unnatural stuff hitting us. And people, of course, have genetic differences in their ability to tolerate that weird, unnatural stuff, but thinking of it as a predisposition, very, very bizarre. So I would encourage people not to think like, oh, I have a genetic predisposition to breast cancer. I think of it more like breast cancer is something unnatural. And most of the time when that unnatural event occurs, it's because of a very unnatural lifestyle, except everyone in America lives an unnatural lifestyle. So the unnatural lifestyle seems natural, so cancer seems like a normal part of life to us, and it shouldn't be.
Okay, so basically, by what you're saying, we're going to take the onus off of the individual. Like, there's nobody guilty here.
No one's guilty,
right? So
but individual choices matter.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so nobody's guilty, but you can get a get out of jail free card if you do a few of the good things.
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
So no question, eating healthy, exercising regularly, really dealing with your emotions, can't emphasize that one enough. I mean, most people do not deal with their emotions. Sure. They feel negative emotion, they suppress it, they put it in a black box, and they focus on getting back to work. I mean, you will have people who will say, oh my God, your mother died and you were back at work the next day, you're so strong. Madness. That's part of the insanity of our culture, and it's part of the reason we're so unhealthy. Is that we do so much that's unnatural. We don't let ourselves feel it's unnatural. We eat processed foods, unnatural. We don't exercise, unnatural. We stay up late and bombard ourselves with electric lights late at night, disrupts the way we sleep rhythm, unnatural. And all of this compromises the function of our immune systems. And then we live in this toxic sea of preservatives and pesticides and artificial chemicals which mutate DNA, many of which are safe and declared safe and legal to be put in our food supply, which is madness. I mean, utter insanity. We know some of this stuff is carcinogenic and it still ends up in the food supply. And so there's tremendous room for us as individuals to wake up and realize this and start to say, you know what? I am going to reverence my body. I'm going to reverence eating in a natural way, moving in a natural way, sleeping in a natural way. And really the reason most people don't do it is lack of education, lack of cultural awareness. It's not normal in our culture. You're weird in our culture if someone serves you like a cupcake with a bunch of food dye and preservatives and God knows what going into creating it, and you look at it and actually think twice about eating it because of what it may do to you. That's weird.